Okay, and I'm going to give a little introduction. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jerry Bartholomew, a professor in the Department of Microbiology and organizer of the OSU Art Sci Group. Earlier this year, my co-host, Dr. Dominique Bachelet, organized a series of talks by scientists on the positive aspects of climate change in order to inspire artists for a show at the Corvallis Arts Center entitled What Will Nature Do? This term series of talks, co-sponsored by the Art Sci Group, the Corvallis Arts Center, and the Department of Biological and Ecological Engineering, is by scientists who are also artists or artists who are also scientists, with the goal of exploring how their science might inform their art and how their art might inform their science and how they integrate these. And this will be the last talk in that series. So today, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Jay Noller. I first met Jay when he was head of the Department of Crop and Soil Science at OSU, and he's now a professor emeritus, but continuing to serve as leader of OSU's Global Hemp Innovation Center, so known as Dr. Hemp. In addition to hemp-related research, his research has, over the years, has principally focused on human interactions with soils in modern and ancient agricultural and forest landscapes around the world. And as part of that research, he's also encouraged his students to explore the art of their science. Jay describes himself as an art scientist exploring impermanence in natural and cultural systems. His studies focus on chronos sequences of soil, landscapes, and civilizations to yield maps of paintings and narratives of scientific and artistic interpretation. So Jay, we'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Sound check, we're doing good?
You're good.
All right, and I apologize, I can't get my video to operate, but we'll just live with that and we'll see my presentation. Thank you all for joining this seminar. It's my distinct pleasure to be able to do this because it's been a chief focus of my work, especially at OSU, when in 2007 I was able to, as an associate professor, I was able to change my position description in the Department of Crop and Soil Science to include recognition of my peer appraised artworks and other of what artists would see as part of their curriculum vitae. I had that added to my position description. I was very appreciative of my department head at the time because I said, I'm stumbling in my science if I don't do my art. And that I'm doing my art, visual art, in my studio at home, but I've moved it into the lab, and that was weird to see canvases and such in the Ag and Life Sciences building in a laboratory that somebody's painting in there. And then I have, of course, by that time, I had already instituted a rule way back when I was professor at Vanderbilt University, and that was that every one of the students, undergrad or graduate, that worked with me as a mentor was that they had to produce some art project as part of working with me. So that there's actually an opera, hasn't been done yet at the Opry, but back in 98, I had a grad student who wrote an opera on the cataclysms of tsunamis in the Mediterranean, and so that was just an example of the limits that I will push my students to, and that is you've got to go on stage at the Opry and do an opera. But she was operatic. Every one of my grad students, especially at OSU, have come from a some sort of different background. Half of my grad students, actually, if you look at them, I think about 14, 15 of my graduate students that I've had in my career at OSU had their prior degree was in either dance, visual art, music, or like art form, and they got a master's and or PhD with me in soil science or crop science. So if that says anything about how important I think the two are, I don't think they're different. And I've been able to demonstrate that over the arc of my career. So if we look at sort of my uh, what I want to talk about today is how critical it is, and I want to give you visual because I'm a visual artist. I'm also a pianist, so I play all sorts of genres. But that's beside the point. That kind of helps sometimes. Um, but this is on top of the hill, the view from the rim of the Waimea Canyon. My office, where I am right now, it would be behind the camera, just down the hill on the coast here in Kauai. Um, and I'm here, put the headquarters for this company. It's a biotech startup. We're developing plant-based medicines. I'll talk about one of the plants later. You probably already know what that is, but it's one of many that we're actually working with. So this view, in a way, is why I'm here on Kauai, because it was a project I did over 20 years ago. I was involved in an international project to try to figure out how the Earth's crust surface really weathers into soil over time and compare rates around the world. There was the Stanford Berkeley team that worked on this landscape, and they've uh, essentially put together a framework that really has been the dominant paradigm since uh, we were at Berkeley. My wife was a faculty member there, and I had a company in San Francisco. And we looked at Kauai as one of the oldest islands in the island chain. It's a great chronosequence. The surface here is somewhere around 4 million years old by the rock age. Soils would be just younger than that. So you're looking at the biological and physical weathering of basalt into this red clay. It's lost everything out of it. Um, and I've always, it's a North Star, but I've had issues with exactly how they did their studies for a long time. But so that's one of the things I want to look at, particularly with regard to the soils. And we'll come around back to this later on. Where am I now? It's following a very similar sort of beat. I need to get a visual fix on the situation. So here my visual fix is on those plants, most of them introduced. In fact, old cropland to the left. I now have a house that's on that plantation. It's by the coast. But this is one of the things where Hawaii sees, an advantage coming out of COVID that plants need to be looked at as a medicine source. Over 99% of US prescribed medicines come from a barrel of crude oil drawn out of the ground. And that needs to change. So we are working to do that. So when I look at the plants that are growing on this soil, um, they're prospering well. Is it just they're just doing well with water and dust and some small nutrients that are cycling? All of these have to go into eventually into the composition of the plant that would be produced, that would produce a new antiviral therapeutic, etc. It's also important that as you look off to the right in this field of view, the top is the Alakai swamp. It's a wetland that's on the summit of the island of Kauai, one of the wettest regions on Earth. And we have here, by evidence by the Stanford Berkeley team and then other teams around the world, it's probably the oldest extant that is still surviving biome, if you will, unchanged in terms of its climate, just because it's been wet and warm. Looking at the fossil record, the pollen and such, it's only the introduction lately of invasives that have changed it, but still the main framework of the swamp, endemic plants that have been there surviving, recycling nutrients for about 3.5 million years. So if we look at, it's the oldest surviving biological relic on Earth. The Amazon, unfortunately, has gone through contractions and expansions through the ice ages, the glacial cycle. So this really stands out. And so we want to be near that to both from the soil microorganisms as well as the ediphology, that is how biology reacts with the earth and gets to that. So in order to understand all of that, I'm already launching into a series of paintings so I can understand the system. And that system ultimately will inform the directions and our production areas and what we want to bring forward. That's a whole nother field of discussion. So I'm going to pull back and take you back to more of my roots as a geologist, um, and then come forward to the more my current level of work. So just as pictures, this is, unfortunately you can't see me today, but my hair is very long. I'll show you pictures when it is, but it's quite gray now. And what this is me painting a sculpture that's in the crop science building main office, was something that was commissioned by the university, one of the centers. And so here I'm with a grad student, and we're putting this together. Did this with Elizabeth Garden. And so Vance Almquist is there. He did his own art project. So we all, even in the lab, we're looking at soils. We're doing this wet chemistry, etc. And then a lot of field work. We also work together on art projects. So I'm going to kind of put this in the order of my various projects. And I just was describing really the Lapa Owl, which is coming up forward. That's the Hawaiian idea of plants and nature as medicine. And kind of, this is not quite historic, but it gives you an idea of things. The Lake Allison, Iron Coast Aphrodite, best of breed, and Lapa Owl. So in this, the Lake Allison was that I had a number of graduate students who were trying to, figure out how soils developed around the Willamette Valley there in Western Oregon, both the valley floor, but also the surrounding hill slopes. And my mother would say, well, "Do I need to draw you a picture?" And I would always answer yes. And she never liked me saying that, but I visually put things together. So write all you want, draw me a picture, and I can start analyzing. So it really starts out with the soil pit. I taught most of your federal soil scientists operating in the Pacific Northwest today. They have all been trained by me, and we take knives out and we dig into the soil. This is one out on the west side of campus by the covered bridge. And we get into all the morphology, but the morphology it's all using all of at least 11 of our senses, human senses we need to use to describe a soil. And so the visual is a very key part. And So the soils across the valley are, of course, affected by Lake Allison, which was an intermediate or intermittent glacial lake when the Columbia River, flooded. And so a new hotel was being designed and built up in Newburgh by the Austins. They're the ones who funded the new business school building, the Austin family program, et cetera, et cetera. Major donors for the university. They were going to build that. Somehow they got a hold of me, commissioned me to put some artworks up, and here I am using a blender, mixing up soil. And I have to say that I had two graduate projects, actually two federal grants came out of this workbench in my studio. And that is recognizing the chemistry and the mineralogy effects on water flow. And not only that, but how roots would actually move into these soil profiles. And so that's moved up and eventually has helped improve for a number of soil series on the valley floor, grass seed operations in particular, um, how their various surfactants that they use in their herbicides and such were actually having negative effects on the crop production, hence seed yield, and hence economy for the state. All from that, just having blending and trying to make a paint with acrylics in a studio. So you can see there's a mix. And of course, it's a large painting. And there, my hair is more the length it is today. Post COVID, I haven't got a haircut for over a year. But in any case, these are concrete panels, and I took samples of the soil underneath the hotel at the excavation site, and then put these all together in these large steel frames. And if you go to the Allison Inn and Spa, you'll see the cool pool with the warm colored soil earth painting, and then the warm pool over on the left is what I imagine if you were in that pool at the time this was flooded, what the bottom of the ice flows and the glacial waters would have looked like. Um, and so they're there to tell a story of Lake Allison. The color palette, as you can see, the paintings match the building and vice versa. Um, so here I'm utilizing soil. In fact, went around and we named all 200 rooms with different soil series from Oregon. Those were dropped. You'll just see a room number as you go, if you were to go. So the painting there is really, it's on the right. That's a geochronometer, so one can measure out the ratios, and it has in that the Milankovitch cycle. So the cycle of inundation of flooding is all proportional over the last 2.8 million years, and showing seasonality of the soil. So it gives an idea of how soils develop on the valley floor over time, and it's made from the soil, so it has that, the links in terms of what what works and what doesn't. It's a little too fast there. Um, so the one more back. So here's the painting. So it's measured in meters, um, but this came out 2009 was when the hotel was open. And it was shortly after this that this and several other artworks that I'm going to be showing you. But this one in particular um, was, I think, influential in uh, so I'm a professor, of course, emeritus now, but when I went from associate to full professor, they always point out what your distinction is. It's always in your field. Unfortunately, my advancement to full professor was not because of my science. It's actually in the letter from the provost, was not that, but it was all about my art. And so actually at OSU, I retired as professor of soil science and professor of art, even though I did, whatever. So, but this is, um, if one looks at it, one can go up there, you'll get a brochure. They have a book and about with my paintings that are around the hotel and such. And so this is if one wants to look at the cadence of the flooding of the valley to build up the soils. Um, it's it's all imbued in the painting. This is in part because I've worked with archaeologists for almost 40 years, and we always look for these chronometers that are subtly held in proportion. And if one, this is one of the hotel's promo pictures, so you can see the painting again, the ice on the lake. Um, I'm also very interested, of course, soil development, not only in the Willamette Valley, but also on the coast. And that's really been a big part of it. And in this case, working out how iron minerals form in these soils in different environments of the world. And I've worked on, what, 5 continents. And there's typically from a rock, which is in the gray, to very old red. You might remember the first picture I showed you here in Kauai, it's very red because it's very old, it's very loaded with hematite. So it gives us an idea about age, but it also gives a lot of other ancillary information about biology. So one of those things about biology is that red can form very quickly or it takes a long time. And if we look at the seeps along the any cliff in on the Oregon coast in the summer, particularly July to August, when these temperatures are high enough, and it's drying enough of the water that's seeping out, you'll see that the ferrihydrite or the sort of dissolved iron will actually turn into hematite and ferrihydrite. It's a alpha form of hematite that's Fe2O3. It's a oxyhydroxide actually in this form. And you'll see what looks like oily sheen on it. That oily sheen is actually a monolayer of silica. It's a hydrosilica, a mono molecular silica that forms these one atom thick sheets. So if you ever want to look at a one atom thick sheet and how it can display light, is to look at that. So that adds dispersion, it adds a deep richness to the air color. And so we had a couple of grad students, in fact, 2 grad students, not only at OSU, but another 2 at Portland State University, just looking at these again, just coming from visually seeing this. And then also I did a painting. This is in 2010, again, showing the color and how it's seeping out, just trying to figure out. So painting, I mean, and others who work sort of in this space can recognize new elements. So it's a discovery element, but also in terms of mixing the colors, I'm working with the various iron minerals to figure out what is the combination that gets to that. If I have the right backing, such as in this, then I'm getting both the adsorption as well as the reflection as well as the transmission of light, which is what we're observing in the field. And that helped us to refine our XRD work on the mineralogy. So this is a question I'm asked a lot. And is it science or art? And that is, well, just throw away the or. It's art science or science art. If we look at a scientist, we usually put a modifier in front of it, like I've been a soil scientist, an earth scientist, now, I don't know, pharmacological development scientist. It's looking at this, it's art science. It's appealing. If you go to the private dining room at the Allison restaurant called Jory, which is this the restaurant there, you'll see this painting, and it's of one of these Iron Coast beautiful spotosols where you have the contrasting depleted E horizon. That's irons all move down into the BH and BS horizons. And these are all jargon that we use in soil science, but it also gives a appeal. So this and about a dozen of other of my paintings are in all sorts of soil textbooks and on the covers and also within them. Um, we had a project looking at landslides and the effect of undercutting by wave erosion, but also tsunamis on potential landslides along the Oregon coast. This was a seed grant with Sea Grant. It was a seed grant, and so in this case, looking out at Seal Rock, uh, can we see the landslides here? Well, maybe. So again, draw a picture, paint me a picture, and now you can see the tree is kind of floating on this wedge of soil, and there's other wedges of plants that used to be on the forest floor there at the higher level, and they're dropping into the sea. All of these can now be used because of that research. We can get an idea of what is likely sediment load on a large wave event. And of course, that changes the dynamics of how the water flows into the surrounding communities, but also using as an idea of what is wave run up and past tsunamis. So there's a series of paintings that kind of go with that project. Um, Interested in early human transhumanists. This is one of a series of paintings with working with Lauren Davis over in anthropology about how humans moved into South America through North America. There's the ice gap, and then there's the coastal route. Of course, the white line in the background, that's the shell midden, but that's only the most recent, 1,500-year-old, 2,000-year-old. But that's not transhumanists that was occurring at 14 to 20,000 years before present. Um, and in this, we actually went off comparing this sea cliff with the visual exploration of the 18,000-year-old sea cliff, which is about 40 miles off of Newport, off of Yachats at this location. And we can see essentially a similar sort of sea cliff with similar soils like that at that location. And so trying to get an idea that once technology advances, we'll have underwater archaeology along that to actually find evidence of people on those places. And so here's my painting of it. Um, and with the touches of human, including the split rock in the foreground, some tourists going and breaking apart a boulder, but showing the iron oxides in the fracture, the white of the early indigenous shell midden, and then off in the distance is just a piece of standing timber that has a straight edge cut that was from upstream from some logging operation. Um, and so I try to imbue in the paintings these deeper senses of humanity and time. One of the things really interested in are these isolate ecosystems, these little island hillocks along the Oregon coast. Also, we have some here in Hawaii. I'm starting to look at, especially up pinnacles up in the Alakai, where these plants are and their ecosystems are fully physically cut off from surrounding areas. So there's a whole series of these. This is another book cover um, uh, image. It's been adopted for that. Again, looking at these sea stacks and of course the iron oxides and other cuts. Then we talk about tsunamis. We know about the effects of tsunamis through a lot of geologic work along the coast. One of our projects down in the Florence area was to look at um, what the most recent tsunami of 1700, January 23rd, I think, 2 in the morning, 1700. And there's reasons why we know that time and everything. But on the this is a 3 panel, how how I think in terms of when I look at something on the landscape today, I'm able to go to process as well as time. So on the panel on the left, it's just a gray white high contrast painting of that part of the wetland there in Florence. And then the next is a architectural drawing, if you will. I've outline all of the rocks. I have a Jacob staff there for scale, um, and ultimately blending over to the darker layers, the tsunami layer, and looking at what plants would have been growing on that wetland surface. And then in the distance, you can't see it, but if you touch the painting, you see there's a white texture, and it's really the churned up water of the 1700 tsunami coming in, which led to the deposit in the central, which is then buried by a river deposit by the Sayusla in the leftmost panel. So there's history in these, and then I've worked in Cyprus for 3 decades. Worked for the UN peacekeeping project with Kofi Annan for a year, and a lot of archaeological studies were in support of them. And here I'm experimenting with the topography, the hillshade. This is another view of that same peninsula, the Akamas Peninsula on the west side of the island. Here I'm getting into hyper realism, if you will, in terms of the view, and in this case, trying to figure out the why these benches exist along there. This is working with a PhD student, a Cypriot, who's now in charge of the geological survey now of Cyprus, and so this is again looking at how these armored shores um, led to this stair-stepped landscape in this particular environment. And then something like this one, wherein I can tell the entire history of the island from its origins way back as part of the Tethys Ocean to what it is today, including evidence of tsunamis, archaeological sites, and that island off in the distance on the very tip of it was where Antony and Cleopatra anchored and spent their last night together. So these sorts of the historical Roman lighthouse, it's the foundation is there, and other things. Um, I'm trying to figure out in this case about tsunami blocks. Which changed the. So we have that here in Oregon, the tsunami run up. So I set up that program for the country of Cyprus, and then that's been moved around to Egypt, Syria, although I don't know if they're using it anymore, Lebanon and Turkey and Greece. So um, here I'm just contemplating the force and dynamics and differences of how evidence of tsunami and how trying to figure out how to date them. That one boulder on the upper left sits on top of this Roman lighthouse and other evidence. So we know that's the 1220 AD tsunami that wiped out the lighthouses around the Mediterranean, including the one in Alexandria, Egypt. So, and of course, I went into mapping. That's my big thing. That's why they brought me to OSU from Vanderbilt, was I could map and teach mapping. And so maps are just another art form. This is one of the excerpt of a quad that I mapped in Cyprus. I think I've mapped in my career something on the order of about let's see, yeah, it's about 15,000 square miles. And yeah, anyways, so that's, and then of course I like to get into the detail of stratigraphy. It tells me a lot about environments, but in this case, also how roots are going to get down into the soil, and that's again on the Pedios River in Cyprus. Um, let's see, where's my cursor? Okay, just more hyperrealism, and then just before the pandemic hit, decided to go, and I need to take some time off. Um, so Elle and I, my wife and I, took about 6 weeks in Oaxaca, Mexico, and I wanted to envision what a hemp breeding program at OSU would look like. But I didn't want the hemp breeding to be doing what everybody else had been doing. I'd already been breeding hemp over in Eastern Europe by this time for 5 years. I was in my third year breeding hemp in China, um, and just barely getting going at OSU. It's something that one of the things why I'm here in Kauai is to kick off, just to operate OSU's tropical hemp breeding program here on Kauai. So here I'm just painting the flower on the left in inflorescence, which is the typical form of cannabis sativa. But as you can see, I'm painting something entirely different on the right there in our courtyard there. But if we look at really close in at the inflorescences on cannabis sativa, whether it's marijuana or hemp, the flowers are beautiful in terms of color and such. I do have some paintings of these underway, and you'll actually see that. So I've been a focus now. We're filming our second year on a docu-series, Amazon Prime, on Jay's World of Hemp. They follow me around the world. And the series launches in the fall, and so the painting on this one will be coming out. The trichomes is really where the value in hemp and marijuana is, because that's where the cannabinoids get produced. But I'm also looking at, so what else could happen? And I'm going to give you a series of these paintings that at the keynote address kicking off the Association of Horticultural Science meeting, was virtual last summer, um, was giving folks a visual on, look, this plant can go in this direction, so start your work, start going. Stop repeating what everybody else does. This plant can do amazing things, and I've already been able to push it in different directions. And I'm using brassica, that is wild mustard, which is known as Brussels sprouts and kale and cauliflower and broccoli. All of it is one species, and it's just because through human ingenuity, it has all those different forms and tastes. And so I know that this could be done with cannabis. And so here we're looking at canna sprouts. And so I'm already giving them directions on where that can go. And of course, it's a lovely antioxidant color. Canna flower, like cauliflower, actually, it could go this direction. And it'll have, these giant sacs with cannabinoids in it of all types. The canarabi, so where the root gets greatly enlarged, kind of like kohlrabi. And you can see what I'm doing here. I'm doing what my mom wouldn't do, and that is draw me a picture. And then also we know that it's perennial. In fact, the oldest, longest lived was about 70 years old when they cut it down next to Gilmore Annex. Was the oldest cannabis tree. And on campus, you need to know that the Hemp Research Center for the U.S. Was at OSU for 50 years, 1880 to 1935. I've just worked to bring it back, and it is back. By federal law, the center is OSU, and we get defined funding that doubles each year. So So here it is. It could be a hemp tea. So these paintings are done on hemp canvas, gold leaf, and then I'm painting the hemp on top because the plant itself I think is worth more than its weight in gold. So just giving you that sort of idea. And I think um, with that I can go all the way up to my first slide to give you an idea of where I am today, physically as well as sort of mentally. Um, and that is, I'm in the field um, and I'm launching a new series of paintings because I think it's going to help my new company do better. So, with that, thank you.
Thank you, Jay. That was wonderful. I'm always amazed by your paintings and the variety of things that you've done in that medium. Um, I, I don't know if you talked about what you were actually painting on for that last series that you showed.
Yeah, it's a hemp canvas. So it's again, it's multi-layered. Always gonna layer ideas, thoughts, knowledge into the my painting. So that it's hemp, and then it's gold leaf, hemp canvas, and then I'm painting with acrylics on top of that. Oils tend to lift the gold leaf off of the hemp, but the acrylics didn't, and they dry faster, I think. Maybe the reason why. Um, and of course, hemp is going to be an invaluable plant in our new era of a um, really a phyto-industrial era, which is really kicking off now. We've come through fossil carbon, and now we're going to have the living carbon. All our computers, everything's going to be coming from plants. They already are. So it's nice to see 2020 as sort of that demarcation in human history and to live through it.
So you see
Oh,
the end of the plastic era then?
We're gonna have no because dang it, all they're doing is they're making new plastics. It's still plastic. It's just coming from a modern carbon, not not a Cretaceous carbon. So yeah. Oops.
so are there any questions out there? We have a session following this that I know a lot of people will be tuning into on showing, talking about their work on climate change. Have you ever directly addressed that topic? I
Yeah.
mean, I realize that some of your, that it all does in some way, but
Yeah. So my PhD thesis, which was mapping the most of the western coast of the Peruvian well, the entire Peruvian and Atacama deserts, from southern Ecuador to northern Chile, was all looking at soils there as a record of the climate over the last, say, 3 million years, and looking at the effects of El Nino on that. Um, yes, there's, I think you can look at my CV, there's at least a third of them are all directly related to climate change, talking about that. Yeah.
okay, there's a question here in the chat. What did you finish your soil paintings off with? Lacquer, matte medium?
I rarely do anything. It's whatever the last brushstroke on acrylic is, that's it. Um, Now the paintings that like the Allison, they have a few layers of clear acrylic on top of that. So I will do that in places where I want to, preserve it. So it can. That's a really adverse environment with that pool and the, chlorine gas. So
What have been some of the challenges in working with the media, in with Earth directly?
I think the biggest challenge is to know what the um, pH is of your pigment. So, one's working with acrylics, you need to be mindful that your pH is at about 8.5, 8.4, something like that. It's alkaline. And if you take a red soil, I'll bet you the pH is going to be 4 or 5. If you take rainwater, it's 5.5. That causes the medium itself to break up and become very stringy, and it looks like you just are boiling egg yolks, which means, and then it doesn't attach or affix very well. So, um, so what I would do is uh, essentially with water mix up, and in that blender you saw, is to add just a elementary lime, that's calcium carbonate, that's used in food service, and you just mix it, and then add the acrylic medium after it stood for a while. So you at least get the pH moving so that if it does react, it's doing it at such a small scale that you're not going to lose a film attachment to the canvas.
Hey, if anybody wants to ask questions, you can just unmute as well as type them into the chat.
Jay, are you going to submit something to the What Will Nature Do? The pieces are due July 1st. It'd be cool if we had one of yours.
Oh, okay. Let's see, July 1st. Yeah, I could do that. I'm actually gonna come back for a week, that last week of June. So,
Perfect. Great.
all right. Okay. Sure. Yeah, Cynthia, thank you.
So in addition to all these other things that you're involved in, are you still involved in Playa?
Yes, so Playa, the art science residency program. I'm on the programming board, and I'm president of their foundation. We have our quarterly board meeting coming up in a week and a half. I'll have to do it remotely, but like I said, I'm in charge of raising money, so I do that for a company as well as for them. Yeah.
I guess my question is, when do you sleep?
I have one of these aura rings. I don't know if you know what that is. It's just a thing, and it measures, deep sleep and everything like that. And everyone says you cannot survive on 5.5 hours of sleep. But I have now a full year's worth of data that says, for me, actually, I can. And I do get that, and I know I suffer no ill effects, and I feel more alive if I'm doing a lot of different things.
Yeah. Well, I realize I know of just a small spectrum of your artwork, and it was really fun seeing the the range, but then also a lot of I loved the hemp pieces where you're imagining and because a lot of times it looks like you're interpreting history and science and a lot of not necessarily just the past, but with your hemp paintings,
Right.
imagining things that you're going to try, I suppose, and so I just thought that was great. I love tying it into your mom's paint a picture. That's just fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's hemp is it's the thing that I think if anything's brought me sort of notoriety, maybe not fame, but at least notoriety. We'll wait and see what happens in the fall. But So now moving into videography, this is weird because we just been shooting 2 episodes here just a week ago, and then I'll meet them in LA, and then they've been following me around all over the place, and so it's kind of like James May or Anthony Bourdain, and this is and I've been cast into this character of myself, which is really weird.
Oh, fun.
Where's
And it
that
comes
going
out
to
in September.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, there's shots of Corvallis. We did all that. Oh goodness. Back in the fall, also back at last spring. During COVID, it's been tough, but it's yeah. Um, so yeah, it's fun. So we have finish up this season 2, and then season 3 we start filming. I think in Japan in a couple of months. So
And what's the name of the video series and where will it show?
it's Amazon Prime, um, and so anybody who subscribes to that can
Yeah.
get it. There's a whole episode on me in my studio in Corvallis painting a hemp trichome. So yeah, that'll be fun. But
The
yeah.
title?
Oh, the title. They haven't fixed the title yet. Right now, it's just in air quotes, Jay's World of Hemp.
And what do you want it to be?
I don't get to say, so I'm not going to disappoint myself. The other producers will do that.
Well, thank you, Jay. You taught me some things I never knew.
Okay.
You're welcome. Yep.
I'm really curious, Jay. When did you start painting, and what was your first painting?
There's a picture in the family album. I'm 3 years old, and I had my own easel. My dad was trained as an artist. He has his degree in art history from Cal State LA, and he did that while he was designing early satellites like Pioneer and such. Most of the extra Earth orbit probes, in fact, all up until the mid 90s, my dad designed. So I've had big shoes to fill. So artist and space scientist, rocket scientist. But there wasn't a field like that. He has honorary doctorates in space physics from Cambridge and MIT and blah, blah, blah. He's still alive. He paints waves. They're in Southern California, and we've painted together all sorts of different things. So yeah, when I started at 3, and we've just been painting together ever since.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that's 58, almost 59 years that we've been painting. So yeah.
Wonderful. Kate, did you have a question? Did I cut you off?
I wondered if Jay is going to have those little flamethrower comments in his Amazon Prime series. Like, I didn't realize we were at the cusp between, a new kind of carbon. We're doing plant-based instead of fossil-based. And the other thing that was really, there was something else you threw in there too, that, just an offhanded remark that 99% of our medicines are made from fossil fuel.
Yep. Yes.
Stunning stuff.
Yeah, it is. So both of those you'll see on Amazon Prime in the fall. No, probably it'll be in the spring. I don't know when season 2 comes out. So we'll see. You know,
Well, certainly looking forward to that, but
yeah,
I'd like to see some of your new paintings too.
Yeah.
sure.
You do you still have a show coming up in the gallery in Ag Hall?
Yeah, I think it's been pushed off 3 times. COVID's done that. And so I would hope at some point that, we could do that. There'll be some new paintings coming in. So we'll see. My house here, so the crew's back in late July, and I hope to have a number of sort of Hawaiian, at least painted um, canvases. And this will be kind of looking at this concept of lapa'au, which is what Hawaiians call their, ethnic, their form of medicine and wellness. And so I have teachers here that help inform me about that, and it's always at their invitation. And so um, it's this is a good place. The state and federal leadership has been really good to work with, and um, one of the sounds really silly, but one of our main projects for the company is we're developing a truly therapeutic famine relief food, because right now what's dispensed by USAID is peanut butter paste with milk and sugar in it, and that's it. They add vitamin A, and they call it a RUTF, that is ready to use therapeutic food. And so we've been working with the new director of USAID, Shannon Powell, and the undersecretaries of Ag, as well as other folks. Written up an executive order for President Biden so that we can really change how we focus on famine. So we're working on, pulling that together. And the Hawaiian delegation here, the senators, particularly Mazie Hirono, has been very helpful in helping us sort of describe a new world of being able to actually address the problem rather than peanut butter it over. So, yeah.
That's great. And where can I find information about that? Because I teach a course on food and climate change. So this would be an interesting thing for my students to read about.
Yeah, it's, let's see, what do we have? All I have on my website is that it's one of the products that we're putting together. We're working at the national level to change the definition and the sort of demands, because that's done every 5 years. And so we'll then push out our contribution, and hopefully others will as well, to do that. So it's with a consortium of Canadian and New York companies, but we're leading that effort. So, when I started at OSU, I was told, hey, come here, and the whole line in the College of Ag has been, we need to, increase agricultural production to feed the world. And I think we failed in so many, many, many ways. And so now we want to really think about, food is really is the first. If we're looking at triage, it's not like, oh, I need to go to the doctor. It's like, what are you eating, and when are you eating, and how are you eating it? And it's about it's garbage in, garbage out. And somehow we've missed that in our food supply globally. and it's driven largely by commodities. So I think I see a wedge here that we can drive into moving forward, and not just because a peanut grower in Georgia, a GMO beet grower in Arkansas, and a dairy person in Wisconsin benefits.
That'd be great.
Good.
Worthwhile, for sure.
Yeah. So there's,
Yeah.
there's a bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you have something that I can get my students to read, please let me know.
Yeah, sure. Got it.
Okay, well, Jay, thank you so much for
course.
joining us
Thank
today. I know that some people have to get off and get on to another meeting soon,
Yep,
and I'm sure
right.
in your busy schedule, I'm glad you could fit us in.
Yes. Thank you so much for being
Yes,
persistent.
of course, yes. And mahalo and aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha.